great tone to play, you know.
Hello?
Have you ever snogged a lady?
We had a technical problem.
Are we on?
Yeah, we're on there.
Can I swear? Shit!
Well, you wait ages for a Capital presenter to appear on Crunch and Roll, and 3 come along at once. Unlike Cam and Chris, who've been on in the last couple of weeks, it wasn't necessarily where Neil Bentley hankered to work, though. Our chat with Neil is funny, honest, and in some places, well, jaw-dropping. We won't give away too much, but you're going to hear the ultimate bittersweet job offer. There's also the time one of the biggest DJs in the world carries records into a nightclub in Barnsley for him, a brutal rejection letter that might not have been all it seemed, and the real story about his exit from Capital. Plus more parky positivity, and in the interests of balance, a nice story about Madonna too. As usual, there's some strong language and adult content in this episode. Let's crunch and roll. Oh yeah. Neil, how are you?
I'm really good, though massively nervous because I feel like I've come in on this therapy session, which I haven't paid for, and I haven't talked about radio and my career, well, ever, but haven't talked about radio since 2012. So Foxy, this is good. Do I need to sit? And can I sit on this comfy sofa in front of you? Is that okay? Yeah.
If you would, and close your eyes, and
thank you.
Just hold your hands out.
You can't say that nowadays.
We could have done when we first started, but not now. You're right. All right. So, look, firstly, thank you so much for being on Crunch and Roll. I was over the moon when you said yes, so thank you. I always ask the question, where are you from? I don't know, are you a London boy?
No, I'm not. I'm from Portsmouth originally. Right. So, yeah, before we do that, I want to check with you on your research. Which stations do you think I've been on? Okay, so let's do a quiz. Go.
Power.
1, yep.
Horizon.
Correct.
Chiltern?
Yes.
Northants 96.
Yes. Oh, shit, you done better than I thought.
B97?
Yes. Hold on a minute. Yeah.
TFM.
Yes.
Galaxy 105.
Yes.
Network. Capital.
Yes. Yes.
Heart.
Yes.
And then a bit on the Big City Network.
Okay, well, have you just read one of my LinkedIn posts or something? That's what you've done. That's what you've done.
I mean, that's it. Neil Bentley, thank you very much for being on Crunch and Roll.
Well, I literally, because obviously you're up in Hull, I thought you might only know me from being up there with my time with Galaxy, which I can't wait to talk about because if anything stands out in my career, that is it for me. But brilliant. I mean, I'm from Portsmouth originally, and unlike a lot of people that you've had on Crunch and Roll before, where they talk about having this real love for radio personalities, it wasn't that for me. I loved radio, sure. I had in my bedroom a setup with a little FM transmitter that I pushed out to my neighbours and did some stuff. But it wasn't about personality, and it wasn't about personalities. It was about music for me. I came from a point in my life where I was doing things like BMXing and breakdancing and all that sort of stuff that young kids did back then in the kind of mid-'80s. And I was just completely entrenched in rap, hip hop. Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, just Run DMC, anything like that. I just absolutely loved. And from that, I'm watching amazing DJs like Jazzy Jeff perform live. I wanted to be a DJ, and then it kind of fused a little bit into the radio, and that's where it kind of led me. So yeah, back in Portsmouth in my bedroom, that's what I was doing. And the station that I was trying to get in Portsmouth to listen to that was outside of the region wasn't Capital, which everybody else was kind of mentioning. Wasn't Radio 1 that I listened to. It was Kiss. And Kiss was the station that I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear dance music. I wanted to hear stuff that I couldn't hear anywhere else. But back in Portsmouth, the stations that kind of did it for me, very, very young, before that time, when I kind of woke up and listened to breakfast radio with my mum and dad, as my dad was getting ready to go out on the building site, was Radio Victory, which was a massive, iconic radio station on the South Coast. And then it was Power FM. And Power FM it really caught me. It was the competitor of Radio 1 back in kind of 1988, 89, 90. And it was just a station that leapt from the dial for me. I mean, I've got a cassette tape that I'm now showing to the video camera in front of me, which is a Power FM More Music 103.2 cassette tape, which has my first ever show on it from July 14th, 1991. So I ended up at Ocean Sound and Power FM because of school, really. I went there on an internship because I couldn't get into the news. I wanted to go to the newspaper called The News in Portsmouth because Jason Donovan on Neighbours was a journalist, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. So I wanted to be at the news. I couldn't get in there, so the next best thing I put on my list was Ocean FM and Ocean Sound. So I got over there, and I as soon as I was in there as an intern at 15 years old, I absolutely fell in love with radio big time and with personalities. And that's my station. Everybody has their station, whether it's a Capital, whether it's a Hallam, whether it's from wherever you are around the country. That station for me, Power FM, at that particular time was just incredible. And there's some presenters that don't get talked about at all that need to be brought up in this podcast. Pete Wardman, who I think works for the BBC nowadays. I think it might be in Leicester, and I think he's on the news side of it. The most incredible breakfast show presenter. Chris Kelly, who was the afternoon show presenter, who was, the looks of a TV presenter, like just so cool, effortlessly cool. He did some work on Kiss in Manchester later on, but he was incredible. Adrian Lovett, who went on to be the CEO of Oxfam. Scott Mills, who was with me when I started my career at Power FM and Ocean Sound. Jeremy Clark, and a very young Howard Ritchie, who is the voice of Capital, who was there. His first show was an overnight show, and he came in to take over from me when I did evenings. So it was just this unbelievable place of incredible talent, and it was the artwork, it was the sound of the station, it was the music they were playing, it was the events they were putting on. It was just brilliant. And after being an intern there and helping out with people's shows and baking bacon sandwiches for people and doing the sports show for Ocean Sound at the weekend, where I cut all of the goals for Southampton and Portsmouth and put them together as a montage, I then got the break in 1991 to do my first overnight show.
I think it's worth just highlighting that you were 16 years old though, Neil.
Yeah, I was, yeah. I was 15 when I was there as an intern, and I was 16 years old when I did my first show on Power.
Just two things. We're talking about Power FM, and I know I've mainly worked up north, started at Viking, as you well know, but we all knew about Power. I knew very little about a lot of the southern stations, but Power had this hell of a reputation, and it was somewhere that I always wanted to go to. And it seems that, you had the Capitals, the Kisses in London, but down south, Power had this.
It was incredible. Yeah, it was totally incredible. Like, there were the production. Well, there's some other people I need to mention who were at Power as well, and intrinsic in the success of Power FM. John Early, who's the managing director of RCS now, who once crashed into the back of my car, but let's not talk about that. John, just an absolute genius. Also another guy called Andrew White. I don't know if you know Andrew White, but Andrew White is just the most incredible producer, who was later working with Capital, but he was there at the very early days of Power FM and Ocean Sound, and he was a person that crafted that sound as well and was a producer there. It was a very, very, very special place. And as you can see me holding this logo up of Power FM as well, it was very iconic in its visual branding as well as its sonic branding. It did a lot of Roy Lichtenstein pop art stuff. It was like nothing else that I'd ever seen or heard. And so I'm not surprised that it did make that kind of jump up north and people heard about it, and I'm not talking about me on there, those people that I mentioned, Pete Wardman, Chris Kelly, Adrian Lovett, Bernie Simmons, those people were just incredible. Andy Sheldon, who's now was the head of the Home Shopping Network in the States. You look where these people have gone on to. Scott Mills. In my career, there's only a couple of people that I've worked with that have really gone to those dizzy heights. Scott, is second in that list. There is one person higher, but my God, Scott, an absolute genius, lovely guy. Haven't seen him for years, but we were very good mates for many, many years. So it was an iconic radio station that gave me the foundation and the springboard to go on to the things that I achieved.
But you were 16 years old, and am I right in thinking you're doing overnights and the late show? I mean, most 16-year-olds are in bed by 8 o'clock, Neil.
Yeah. It was difficult. A lot of support from my family that allowed me to do that because I didn't drive. And Power FM was in Sedgingsworth West. Well, it still is. And I was living in Portsmouth. So that was like a 25-minute drive away. So I had family members take me to the radio station and pick me up in the morning. Now, I know, it's incredible. And then I left school. I started college and I was at Highbury College. And Highbury College in Portsmouth was this place where if you wanted to learn media and broadcasting, you would go to Highbury College. I was kind of a bit of an anomaly because I was on that radio station that all these people wanted to go to, and I was doing my whatever I was, A-levels and sitting guilds and all that sort of stuff. So I was finishing at 6 a.m, going home, having breakfast, then going to college for the day. Yeah, it was a bit crazy. People say, "Oh my God, that wouldn't happen nowadays," but it was just a brilliant thing to do. Of course, my college work suffered massively because I was like, well, I'm already there. So I just forget about doing the actual work at college and doing the proper work on the radio. It was kind of 16, 17 while I was there, 16, 17, 18 that I left Portsmouth. And there was a reason, and it was a very iconic night that I decided that it wasn't going to be Power FM for the rest of my days. I was there on the night that Capital Radio came down and took over the station, and they did it overnight. So they came down, Richard Park came down, who I'll talk about later, never knew who he was. And, I'm a 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid, not really understanding what Capital is, but just knowing that this group is coming down to swallow up Power FM and Ocean Sound. And do you know what? I must thank myself for doing this. I knew at the time that a not very good, very young radio presenter that had the chance to be on Power at that age was not going to stay there. They were definitely going to bring some people in. So Neil, you need to get some demo tapes out anywhere, everywhere, and try and get out of this place and keep your momentum going within radio. But I was there that fateful night that kind of happened.
So where next?
So I sent some tapes out. It was because it was a weird one, because like you said, that people knew about Power FM. So when I was sending tapes out, because I'd kind of heard whispers things were happening, I was sending tapes out to places that were going, well, why would you want to leave Power FM for? And I was getting these letters back from these PDs on stations. I didn't really know how big certain radio stations were because I was very much geolocated in my area. But I was sending it out to Red Dragon and Galaxy over in Bristol. Again, if I wasn't driving there, my mum and dad would drive me up there. It wasn't until I sent a tape to the Chiltern Network. But it wasn't the Chiltern Network. It wasn't that tape, I think, that did it. It was a guy called Clive Dickens, who probably has been mentioned on your podcast before, who, weirdly, I've never met in my entire life. But he was the person that was responsible for going, there's this wet behind the ears presenter overnight on Power who I think would be good in Milton Keynes. Steve Power, why don't you bring Neil up? Now, Steve Power's been mentioned before by lots of people on Crunch and Roll, and Steve did that. And so I was leaving home at 18. I drove to Milton Keynes, 127 miles away from my house, and set up in a flat and went to work at Horizon Radio. And I was absolutely blessed to have an incredible selection of presenters and personalities and people around me at that time to have one of the best times of my life. And somebody, I don't know if they have been mentioned on Crunch and Roll, but you have to get them on. So when you ask me at the end, I'm sorry, I'm going to give this away now.
I knew it.
This is the person that you need to get on, is Trevor Marshall. Now, Trevor Marshall is one of the nicest people ever. He took me under his wing. He was doing breakfast at Horizon with a wonderful person called Helen Lee, who sadly passed away a few years ago, who, I've got pictures of us all together. We were the gang in Milton Keynes. It was just incredible. Trevor was just brilliant. I've slept on his sofa many a night, getting completely and utterly pissed. And it was just a rite of passage going up to Milton Keynes and going out with Trevor and just having a wonderful time. Emma Scott became a really good friend. David Tye, David Francis, who's been around many different places, and Paul Chantler as well. And I must say, that I just remembered it now, actually. After my first show on Horizon, went up to Paul Chantler's office, knocked on the door and went, "Hi, was that okay?" And all he said was, "I thought I hired someone that was a little bit faster than you." I was like,
what does he mean by that?
I was like, fuck. I think he probably, I don't know, I have no idea. Paul Chantler's a very good friend, and I'm sure he didn't mean anything by it, and it might have been a very bad day, but I was like, oh my God, that's just happened. But obviously I was there at Horizon, at just a wonderful time for that network as well. There was just some incredible presenters on there. The network itself, which I hadn't really heard of being down south, that Chiltern network, it was like this really interesting network of radio stations that it just didn't exist anywhere else. And then later on, I did some shows on Chiltern. I did breakfast on Northants Radio, which Chris Brooks mentioned in your other Crunch and Roll podcast, where, to be honest, I think I was a little bit too young. I think I was like 20 or 21 doing a breakfast show, which I was never a breakfast show presenter anyway, and we'll come on to that in a minute. And B97, I did breakfast with a guy called Tim Page, who's still a wonderful friend of mine and a great news presenter and journalist and works for the BBC.
It's interesting. Because I spotted that you'd done breakfast at a couple of places, and you didn't enjoy doing breakfast.
No, I was really nervous. I really found breakfast incredibly difficult to do. As someone later in my career said, "Neil, can you try and not be funny? Because you're not funny, so don't try it." And I think that doing a breakfast show, you're kind of forced into trying to do comedic things which you're not meant to do. And I just wasn't built for a breakfast show, I thought. And I did breakfast on Northants, I did breakfast on B97, but I found just the pressure of delivering content on a breakfast show. And we'll talk about that, like I said, in a second when we get onto the London stations. It really does ramp up when you're in bigger markets. And, if you go back to what I originally said at the start, I didn't start radio in my bedroom because of personalities. I started it because of music. And so I was always a music presenter, really, through and through. So that kind of added pressure to add 2.5-minute links or 3-minute links. And you got to be funny here, or you got to have a punchline here, And don't forget, I was really young. I hadn't really, apart from going out and getting drunk most nights and, I don't know, going to the cinema or whatever, I really wasn't doing many life things to be talking about on a breakfast show. I found it incredibly, anxious ridden. Like I loads of anxiety, just not a place really for me.
Cunty.
We apologise, sir.
We just play records till 8, 9, when do we finish?
I'm not drunk. I've had a couple of drinks. I'm not drunk.
The GWR takeover at Chiltern was just a strange time, really, because Colin Mason, who had been the person behind the Chiltern network, who had put up signs everywhere, which was, "This is showbiz, be an entertainer." Every single studio had that in. He was very larger than life. It was just a very odd time with GWR coming in. It was a time where there was lots of research, because they loved their research. And there were lots of different techniques being pushed, the Bibles, the liner cards, all that sort of stuff, where at the time, it did make people feel very uneasy of where they were going to be or what they were going to do. I certainly didn't know where I was going to be. I certainly didn't think I was going to move from Northants Radio Breakfast to B97 Breakfast. I thought I was off. I thought that was the end of me and in that time. There were radio consultants coming in at that time. That was the first time I'd ever had the opportunity of sitting down with a radio consultant to talk about it. Oh yeah, Steve Wright was my boss at one point. I just remembered that because Steve Wright was, he'd taken a break from Radio 2. Radio 1. He'd come off of Radio 1 before he went to Radio 2, and GWR had him as a consultant boss for breakfast shows around the network. So Steve, we went for, I just remembered this, we went for McDonald's breakfast with Steve Wright in Bedford, me and Tim Page, after one breakfast show once, and there's Steve smoking his massive cigar, eating a hash brown. That was a funny time because obviously Steve Wright is an incredibly important creative personality within the radio industry. Him coming to talk to Tim Page and Neil Bentley on a B97 breakfast show about what potentially we could do, and we really couldn't do that on that particular show, seemed a bit odd, but I guess it was good for morale. I'll tell you what was also kind of strange about those times is you would have to finish your show and then go out for multiple hours in a Black Thunder. Do you know about?
I was at 210 FM, the Black. Well, I'm not going to knock them because I later went on to marry one of the 210 FM Black Thunders.
You married a car?
I married the RAV4. Beautiful beast. No, I married Leanne. My wife was one of the Black Thunders. So I'm not going to make too many comments, Neil.
Well, but we didn't have a Black Thunder crew. So the Black Thunder crew was Tim Page and Neil Bentley. So Tim would drive the Black Thunder around Bedfordshire. We would go and give out some stickers. We would mostly visit some people that Tim knew in the area to have a cup of tea. So we kind of got out of it a lot. But that was part of our contract, that we had to do those multiple hours after a breakfast show.
All right, so next we move on to TFM in 1996.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what a brave move. So you're from down south.
Yeah.
You've done a few stations down south, and then suddenly, I'm guessing back in 96, it was a phone call to say, do you want to come all the way up here?
Yeah, so David Tye, who was at the Chiltern Network with me, he gave me a call and said, look, I think there's a position coming up at TFM if you fancy it. Now, I was under the GWR rule of that time, and what you hear about Bibles and liner cards and all things like that, absolutely true. Do I think it's the wrong way to do it? If I had a business, I would want everyone singing off some sort of hymn sheet, so probably not. But at that time, it wasn't really where I wanted to be. So when David said, look, I've just gone up to TFM, I think there's a possibility of another slot coming up. Do you want to come up? Should I put your name around? I was like, absolutely, let's do this. And up until this point, remember that, hip hop, dance music, as it kind of evolved into, because I was playing loads of gigs when I was at Horizon at lots of different nightclubs when I was kind of 18, 19, 20. And that's where I cut my teeth in clubs. I wanted the ability to have dance music in my life on radio, and that was not going to happen under a GWR rule at the Chiltern Network. So I thought, well, maybe if I could get to TFM, there would be an option for that at some point. So Graham Ledger, who is just brilliant. I don't know if you've ever met Graham Ledger, but he was my boss at TFM. He came down to visit me in a hotel. He was his typical thing of coming down, having Angostura bitters and a little bit of like sparkling water, coming up and, having a little meeting with you in a very plush place, making you feel fantastic. And he said, look, if you fancy it, come up to TFM. So I'd heard of Middlesbrough, but I hadn't been there before. So I was like, well, you know what? You get one life. Let's continue this journey up north. So went from Milton Keynes, broke up with a girlfriend there, headed up to Middlesbrough, and thought, right, let's see how this goes. And TFM, I was there. It allowed me to do some incredible stuff, but it was also a pretty scary time because that really is up north. And I was away from my family. I didn't see them a lot. I mean, it got so, I don't want to put this into, massive depression, but there was like one Christmas day I was on my own having boil in the bag beef in Middlesbrough, and I was like, do you know what? I'm not too sure this is all right. But Graham was amazing. David was amazing. Worked with lots of people there, like Steve Randall, Richard Kell, who's still producing lots of radio up in the Northeast. Ed James turned up there as well to TFM before he obviously going down to Heart and doing wonderful things with the Heart Network in Birmingham. But yeah, TFM, I think if we were going to say what one thing did TFM give me, it gave me that outlet to do dance music again. So gave me my first break really into a dance show. Club TFM was a show that I created on a Saturday night, which was total free choice. Imagine that.
Crazy.
Imagine that.
No, I cannot. That's like a foreign language.
I know. So Graham Ledger said to me, sat me down and said, well, see, you love dance music, and we think dance music is obviously a really big thing in the Northeast. So you want this dance show on a Saturday night? I was like, yes. 5 hours, by the way. 5 hour free choice dance show. It kicked off about 6 or 7. He said, I'm going to give it to you. Let's see what you can do. And, there were iconic dance music record shops in Middlesbrough and Newcastle and Leeds, and I would go travelling all the way around, all the way down to Leeds and all the way back up to get anything that I could possibly get. I spent an absolute fortune on vinyl, and I had like a 5 hour dance show that unlocked the club scene in Middlesbrough, Newcastle, Sunderland, and I was out nearly every weekend.
Do you know, when I was a Viking, we had the Viking FM weekend where, there'd be dance DJs like yourself coming in and doing their thing.
Yeah.
They always felt like they were the cool guys in the corner, but did you have added pressure going into a place like TFM and saying, right, I'm going to change weekends. We're not just doing the standard format. I want to play dance. Did you face any difficulties with that?
I don't think I even thought about it. No, I was so kind of strong-headed that I wanted to do that, and it's a really good question, because if I looked at myself now and said, well, actually, what did I know? What did I know? How did I know what I was going to play was going to get ratings? Or I was just passionate about what I did, and I think I put that argument forward so well that they went, yeah, okay, I believe him. So I just went in and did it. It was just an incredible thing to be able to do. I recorded that show, I've just remembered, on videotape, by the way. So yeah, so I used to record all the mixes and everything off vinyl onto videotape, and then convert the videotapes to whatever system they had at TFM at the time to play it off. Because some of the show was actually recorded with links over the top, and some of it was live, because I wanted to play lots of clubs in that region. I wanted that to be the vehicle for me. So at some point I had to leave that studio to get out there, to get on the road. And that was, I just loved it. Absolutely loved it. Just loved it.
You probably put more effort into that show. And just going back to your anxiety doing breakfast, the content thing. But you put twice as much work into those dance shows than any breakfast shows done across the country.
Yeah. But I didn't have to speak.
Okay, fair
enough. It wasn't about me. It was just about putting the right music together and mixing the right music together. I could do that. That wasn't a challenge. That was just really exciting. I was passionate about it. I didn't have to be funny. I could just, there is only one God within dance music radio forever, and that's Pete Tong. And I listened to the Essential Selection essentially every single week. It was just incredible. But yeah, I did put a lot of time and effort into that show, and I put a lot of time and effort into trying to build that Club TFM brand at that time. I created the Club TFM tour, which went around the Northeast. We had lots of artists to come down. Matt Goss, weirdly, at one time of his life, was a dance music vocalist in a band called Cobra, which was an Italian dance music outfit, and he came to the Empire in Middlesbrough and did a live PA. So we had a load of these people that we brought around the Northeast, and it was just, that's one of my favourite times creating that show, and that led me on to the other bigger dance things that I did in my life.
What's your favourite dance tune of all time, Neil? I'm desperate to ask you.
Very difficult. I don't know. Master at Work, To Be in Love, possibly. Yeah, that changes on a literally an hour by hour basis. Very, very difficult.
I felt like I only have an hour of your life, and I had to ask that question at some point.
Yeah.
I would also like to tell you mine and see what your reaction is.
Yeah, go on. Please don't.
Tall Paul rock the house.
Yeah, good. Nice.
Okay, good.
Nice.
I've got the Neil Bentley.
Well,
guarantee.
yeah, nice. So when I was at TFM, I got the option to go down to GWR Bristol breakfast. So Dirk Anthony and Vaughan Hobbs at the time phoned me up and said, look, we see what you're doing up there at TFM. We want you to come down and do this. Now, James Cannon was moving from GWR to Capital in London. So this was a big opportunity for me. James Cannon was a complete god when it came to GWR breakfast in the Bristol area. So this was the opportunity of taking over a very large breakfast show that was outside of London, but very large. So I got on this train from Middlesbrough to Bristol, probably changed somewhere, I don't even know. It was such a long train journey that I had to drink as much red wine as I possibly could. When I got off the train to meet Dirk Anthony and Vaughan Hobbs at the end, I must have had red teeth and red lips, but I held it together. Anyway, I was asked to go down there to do a breakfast show, but they also asked me with my dance stuff, because I was saying, look, to be honest, this all sounds great. I'm not really a breakfast show presenter, but the dance stuff is really key for me up at TFM. I've got Club TFM. It's a brand that I'm starting. That's really important to me. And they were like, well, what about a dance show on GWR network? And I was like, sorry, what? So you would like a house show, you would like a dance show. We could make that happen. And I was like, okay. Now, when you talk to anybody about GWR, the first thing that doesn't come to mind is dance. So when we talking probably 1997, this was just before I went to Galaxy. So late 97, just coming into 98 maybe. So I was there with the opportunity to have a networked dance show across the GWR network that was no rap, less chat, but loads of dance music from Neil Bentley. But I turned that down to stay in the Northeast.
All right. So in 98, you leave TFM.
Yeah.
Did Galaxy, this is the big one.
Yep.
Galaxy 105, did they approach you? Did they poach you? No?
No. So at TFM, I actually asked Graham Ledger, could I apply for Radio 1? And Graham said, yeah, go for it, mate. Now that is how you manage a team. You've got passions, you go for it. See if you can get a job at Radio 1. So I was at TFM. I sent a demo tape to Radio 1. Now, I haven't read Moyles' book. Oh, by the way, I haven't actually mentioned the fact that me and Moyles were best mates for quite a long time during the Chiltern times. So I was there with Moyles. I sent a tape to Radio 1 with a letter. I haven't read his book, but someone says this is in his book. There was somebody that then sent a load of tapes back to people saying, you haven't got a job because you're shit. I think he had something to do with it. But yeah, can you imagine? I think I've got the letter somewhere. I get this letter back from Radio 1, which basically says, no, you're rubbish, mate. The actual word was shit. And I'm looking at it going, oh my God, this is terrible. To be honest, that wasn't the worst rejection letter that I had, because
what could be worse than you are shit?
Because I didn't really ever think I was going to get to Radio 1 anyway. The worst rejection letter was the one that I wanted to be at, because the one thing I wanted to achieve in my life, I never actually did within radio, which was to be at KISS. And, when I was at TFM, Lorna, who was the head of KISS in London, was coming around what it was under EMAP, and she was coming up to TFM. Mate, I took my Technics decks into TFM that day. I put them behind. Yeah. And when I knew Lorna was coming around to tour the station, I faked recording a show just so I could show that I was mixing in there, so she would potentially know who I was. Andy Roberts never picked up on me. And when I came to London, being at Capital and obviously being at Heart, there was no potential transition for me to actually move through to Kiss. One of my friends did actually make the other move. Simon Dale made the move from Kiss through to Capitol. So he actually did what I wanted to achieve. But yeah, that rejection letter, or many rejection letters from Kiss, which was basically, piss off, Neil, you're never coming to Kiss. They were the ones that really hurt, because Kiss was just, the place that I wanted to be. So I was looking around to see where I could go while I was at TFM. And Graham was also on his way to go somewhere else, and David was moving somewhere else as well. So it became a place where I felt like it was about the right time to move on. So I'd heard of this station called Kiss that was in Yorkshire, and I knew that they had rebranded to Galaxy. And I tuned in and listened and just thought, oh my God, this is incredible. This is everything that I want in a radio station, wrapped up with an incredible brand. I need to be a part of this somehow. And, it was for me, like Chris Brooks's Capitol. As soon as I heard this was the destination I needed to be at. So I sent them a tape and hoped that I would potentially get a meeting so we could talk about it further. I went down, I spoke to Andy McPherson, who was there at the time, Steve Parkinson, and they asked me some questions about, who I liked in the radio industry, and they found out all about me. And I went away and I thought, I really need to get that job. Like, that is just, Galaxy 105 in Joseph's Well was just, it was like electric walking through those doors. God, I wore some hideous clothes. They probably could have like chucked me out just for the jacket I was wearing. But they took a chance, and that's how I got the job. I applied for it. There was no job going. I just said, look, I want to do it. And there was a couple of people that were going to move that were kind of ex-Kiss people that didn't kind of fit the station right. And I ended up coming in, and wow, completely changed my life. Played every club there is going in a 2.5 hour radius of Leeds. Met some incredible people, worked with, again, a bunch of super talented people. I worked with Anthony and Jojo, obviously Hursty, Adil Ray, Alex Pepper, Lucio. I met my wife there, Saffron. I had some really big life moments at Galaxy. I mean, it was just anything you hear about Galaxy of those times was absolutely 100% true. It was an incredible place to be. It had an energy that I've never felt anywhere else. And I got lucky to go to 95.8 Capital FM. And that was nowhere near as good as Galaxy 105. It was the most incredible station. We could get away with a lot. We got lots of opportunities. We did Ibiza, Galaxy in Ibiza every year. We did the Miami Winter Music Conference. That was because we sat down and I said, do you know what? We should go to Miami. And they went, yeah, all right then. I was like, what the hell? And we went to Miami. We did shows out in Miami. You can hear my passion for dance music. I've got, massive producers in dance music. They're the ones that I did idolize. David Morales was one of the biggest people I could ever imagine, ever knowing, ever working with. I ended up exec producing his show. David Morales joined Galaxy. It was just the most wonderful time. In fact, David Morales carried my record bags to Pharaoh's in Barnsley. Now, that is a story which, I mean, I can't even make it up. Every time David Morales came over and he did his show from Leeds, or we did a live OB, I would be there and exec producing that, as well as doing the links on the show or whatever. I get this call on the XD one, Friday night. And it's like, hey. And I'm like, hi, who's that? Hey, Neil, it's David. I'm like, oh, David, hi, how you doing? I'm like, Jesus Christ, David Morales calling me up on the XD. Hey, Neil, this is a terrible impression, by the way, but hey, Neil, you always support me. What are you doing this weekend? I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, I've got to tell him I'm playing an Egyptian-themed club in Barnsley to one of the world's biggest DJs. Yeah, David, I'm playing Pharaohs in Barnsley. I'm coming to support you. So I picked him up at his hotel the next day when he flew in. He came down to Barnsley. He took the record bags out of my car. He walked up the street towards Pharaohs. Word had got out that David Morales was in Barnsley. I've never had a queue like it for a Neil Bentley gig, trust me. And there was this queue down the street, and I was like, oh my God. He came in, he introduced me on, and we became friends for a few years after that as well. And they were the sort of opportunities that Galaxy just unlocked for me. Just incredible moments. I mean, I know that you were in, obviously, the region when Galaxy 105 was there. If you've got any questions you want to ask me about Galaxy 105, I'll give you the straight answer right now.
Well, there's a couple of things that I'd like to touch on.
Yeah.
So, you interviewed some big names. You interviewed Madonna.
Yeah.
On Galaxy.
Yep.
Now, we chat to Cam Kelly, who was doing the network show across GWR.
Yep. He
had the opportunity to interview Madonna. It didn't go very well. What was she like with you?
Yeah, she was amazing. I did hear that interview with Cam, and that sounded awful, what Cam and Sally had to go through there. So I was doing a network interview for Galaxy, and it was the American Life album from Madonna, and it was at the Dorchester in London. Again, I hadn't really been down to London or anything. I was at Galaxy. They, sent me down first class, all that sort of stuff. So it was just incredible. And I was sat in a room full of incredible people. Margarita Taylor was in there, again, before I was coming down to Capital. I kind of knew of her, but she was sat there. There were other incredible people around. Steve Wright was in the room. I was like, we're going to interview Madonna here. I don't know how this is going to go. We were told no autographs. We were told just do your questions and get out. And I was stood outside the door, and they opened the door and let me in. And as I was going in, Steve Wright was backing out, right? And Steve was like, oh, could you sign this? And I was like, oh, okay, right. And I just went, I don't know who he is. As he walked out, right? I thought I'd be really cool, like. So I walked over. She was incredible. She was charming. There was an aura around Madonna like I've never experienced with any celebrity at all. And I wasn't really a massive Madonna fan, to be honest. It was incredible, but I completely fucked it up. So one, the interview never went out, not because I fucked it up, because whoever was recording the interviews for the whole day didn't record any of the interviews correctly.
My God.
So if you go back to that time, because Steve Wright was meant to put it on his show as well, that didn't go out. So all of the records were just chucked away. But I said to her, so what do you do? Like, you've got so much money. What do you do with your money? I don't know why I'm asking that. I don't know. And she was like, well, I like art and stuff. And I said, oh, cool. Right. Excellent. And this was when I was 30. So I went, cool. I just bought a BMX for no reason whatsoever. Right. I just was like, and I'm now looking at her and she's like, BM what? And I'm like, I just bought a BMX. It's a Harrow Freestyler. Always wanted one. Just got it at 30. All right, then. Thanks ever so much. And I start walking out, and then I went just before I closed the door, and I breakdanced too, and closed the door. And I'm like, what the fuck have you just done? But she was laughing. She was charming. Like I said, I didn't have the same experience as Cam and Sally did, but I suppose you catch somebody on a different day, and they're a different person. So it was an incredible experience.
And also, I want to talk about, because you met your now wife, Saffron.
Yes.
At Galaxy 105.
Yes.
I mean, how was that? Was it?
You don't want to get into that. Yeah. Well, Saf started at Radio Air, and then she moved to Galaxy, and then she moved to Galaxy 105, 106. And so I was in Leeds and she was up in Newcastle, and that's how we kind of started dating. Obviously, we met in Leeds and then she moved away. You know, she's the most supportive person in my life. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk about, you know, other things that were happening at the time, but we got together and we're still together and we've got a son and everything's cool. Galaxy 105 was the place I met my wife. And it was a wonderful time. I nearly ended up at a few places, and I do want to do a massive apology because I feel like I should. I have apologised to this person before, but I was given some really terrible advice when I was at Galaxy. I nearly ended up at Hallam a couple of times. I nearly ended up at Radio Air a couple of times, and I nearly ended up at Key a couple of times. The worst one was at Hallam. So at Galaxy 105, everything was incredible. You could do no wrong. You know, figures were just doing incredibly well and everyone seemed like they wanted you. And it was really flattering. And Anthony Gay came along and offered me a job at Hallam. And it was a brilliant job. And it was a great opportunity because I really accepted the job and told some people about it over at Galaxy. They told me to turn my mobile off and just forget about what happened, and whatever you want, you can stay. And I stupidly took that advice when Anthony Gay was trying to get hold of me to sign contracts to go through to Hallam. So I really let myself down as a person by not, you know, communicating and saying, well, actually, no, I want to stay with Galaxy. I wasn't doing it to kind of push people off against each other. It was just a situation that potentially that happened at that time. Yeah, I do feel really shit about that, and causing a like unnecessary stress around a situation. But yeah, sorry, Anthony, if you're listening. Hopefully you'll talk to me again one day.
We're having a party.
Oh, yeah.
So Galaxy 105, you did the
Yeah.
network, you did Mids, Breakfast
Yep.
Cover, the network dance
Yep.
shows. And then the next one, so you move to London and you go to Capital.
Yeah, at the worst time ever. Yep.
Was it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why is that?
So I remember being in the car and phoning my mum. So my dad died in 2001. And you know, he never really got to see the kind of fruits of my or his labour of putting in the time and the work of when I was like kind of 15, 16, 17 years old. And you know, I'd been so far away from home, from Portsmouth, all my career. It was a time that I just wanted to get nearer home. And Keith Pringle, who was down at Capital, gave me the opportunity to come down to be the first presenter outside of the Capital Group to be straight in on daytimes, I think within 17 years or something like that, which was incredible. So I was offered the afternoon show 1 till 4 on Capital in 2003. So I remember being in a lay-by near my home in Castleford and phoning my mum and saying, look, I'm coming home. And literally floods of tears. My dad died in 2001. You know, this was an opportunity of going down and, you know, showing my mum what I could do again, because she couldn't listen to the stuff I was doing up north, and being there to take care of her. So got this opportunity to go down to Capital. Don't forget, it's a wrench to move away from Galaxy because Galaxy is so great. But I thought, well, everyone talks about how wonderful Capital is, and this is my big chance to make it big. Let's go. So I went down there at a time where I don't think Capital really knew what it was doing. And I think Chris touched on this in the last Crunch and Roll. There were many different things that were happening at Capital at the time. Heart was coming online in London, and that was doing incredibly well. It was a good kind of first 6 months, but confusing for me. It was Leicester Square. It was the big bright lights of London. It was living in a flat that cost me £1,700 a month back in 2003. It was a 2-bedroom flat. It was bloody tiny. I mean, it was just absolutely ridiculous. But it was a wonderful salary. It was a wonderful opportunity. It was a wonderful job. So I had to take it. But it was just confusing. I didn't know really who I was on that station because it wasn't a dance music station. It was it was a top 40 hit music station at that time. And then it went through a couple of, situations like the takeover by GCAP was the first one and the one where, I was let go. So I've been down there for 2 years. I was there when I turned up at the back end of Chris Tarrant coming off Breakfast. It was incredible to meet these people. Tarrant and Foxy, James Cannon was on before me. By the way, I was meant to take over James Cannon's show when he left GWR in Bristol. When I was at TFM, I got that offer from Dirk and Steve and turned it down because I wanted to stay at TFM. And then GWR or GCAP then take over Capital, and I'm kind of let go in a pretty shitty way. So that time at Capital was a bit of a funny time. Met some wonderful people in that building as well. Courtney, who's the security guard, who's at the front of Capital, is just an institution. Royston, who's been there forever and incredible. Everyone that works behind the scenes within Capital. But it just didn't, I don't know, it just didn't fit with me completely over my time, but did some wonderful things that I would have never got the opportunity to do, like bid against Rod Stewart in an auction, stupidly.
You've got to tell us about that. Go on, Neil.
Well, it was Help a London Child, lots of events for Help a London Child. And you, as a presenter, went down there to help out. And there was this one particular one at Dover Street Restaurant and Jazz Bar. Neil Fox and I were hosting it. And there were these auction lots that came in. By the way, this was before my first paycheck. So I had no money at all, right? I just come down from Leeds, moved everything down there. I literally had no money. But you kind of get caught up in this fact that you think you're potentially a celebrity because you're on Capital. Yeah, I was getting married, well, in a couple of years, and I thought, do you know what? This auction lot that's coming through would be perfect for Saf's wedding dress. And it was like a Chanel dress or something. And it was a prize, an auction prize that had sorry, I've just remembered it. It had a picture with the Cheeky Girls, right, as a part of this auction lot, right? I know it sounds a bit of a weird one, but so I'm there doing this auction and Rod Stewart's betting. And I heard you, when you did the Chris Brooks one talking about George Michael at the end out in the airlock. This was the crazy thing about Capital. You just met loads of these amazing people that were just around. So, Rod Stewart's bidding and it's not going very far. So I'm like, fuck it. I might as well just give this a bit of a go. I'm Neil Bentley, for Christ's sake, at Capital. I've got loads of money, or none. So I'm like, yeah, up me next. And Foxy's looking at me going, well, you're bidding. Yeah, Neil Bentley's in. And I'm like, shit. So we then start bidding, bid. He pulls out. I'm left on my, I'm left on my own thinking, surely Rod Stewart's going to come back in now. And no. So unfortunately, I won this really, really expensive auction lot at Help a London Child auction, which I really shouldn't have done. But, that was the thing, it wasn't all bad at Capital, far from it, but it was just a very odd time because it wasn't the Capital that it is now, which is very focused and it knows exactly what it's doing and really big. It was the Capital that was kind of in the middle of the end of the Chris Tarrant days and this before the global days kicked in. So it was difficult.
There are a couple of things I want to talk about, and just tell me to piss off, Neil, if you don't want to talk about them. But why were you let go?
I don't know. So I just interjected with the story that I turned down GWR Breakfast in Bristol. I don't think it had anything to do with that at all. I don't know. There were a couple of instances. There was one where I walked in, because Chris, again, on his podcast said he got the 1 till 4 show in the afternoon. He was very nice, Chris, not to mention that he stole it off me. We didn't steal it off me. He got the job. I walked in one day after being out. I got this reputation for doing voice of gods at award shows. So myself, Alan Dedicoat, James Cannon and a few others, when we finished our radio shows, we would end up being on Park Lane doing most of the award shows in London, like 4 or 5 times a week. And I was out doing one at Royal Hospital Gardens in Chelsea in the middle of the day. I got a copy of the Guardian. I opened up the Guardian. I found out I lost my job in the Guardian. So I was like, okay, this is kind of odd. So I walked into Capital because I was summoned into Capital to come in to talk about it. And as I walked around, Chris is in one of the studios and he beckons me in. So I'm like, okay, hi mate. He goes, man, I'm really sorry. I've just got 1 till 4. And I went, no worries. And I just walked out and walked into this meeting. No. And Chris and I are great mates. It doesn't matter. It's, it's one of those things. And I walked into this meeting where they said, look, you're going to be coming off a 1 till 4. We're going to put you on this, that, and the other. So that was the first kind of demotion that I got. And then the second, I was just summoned to Steve Orchard's office, who, had come in with GCAP at the time. And I went up there and they just went, well, that's it, Neil. And the hilarious thing about that is I came down from that and I was asked to do some bank holiday cover. Literally straight from that meeting. And Neil, is it okay if you can cover this one and this one on bank holiday? And I went, fuck off. No way. No. Listen. And I walked out and I never went back into Capital. Right. That was it. I was like, I'm not having this. And I lost my house.
No.
Yep. This was 2006. I lost my house. It was the year I was getting married. So yeah, it was absolutely fucking devastating for me. Absolutely devastating. Now, the interesting thing with this is, I don't know why I was let go. Probably it was just a situation of, we are coming in, it's our train set, we're going to play with it, this is who we want here, there and everywhere. And that's fine, that's business. But I then get a phone call from a guy called Richard Park, who I've never met, though been in the same kind of station as when I was 17, 18 years old, when they took over Power. And that phone call was like, well, it wasn't from him, it was from his PA. And she said, look, do you mind coming in to have a word with Richard, if that's okay? And I'm like, what? And this was like, not too long after I'd been let go from Capital. Maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a month. So Richard was over at Magic at the time. And I went over to see Richard. And his question was exactly the question that you've just asked me. What went on there then, Neil? And I was like, I've never met Richard before. And I said, I don't know. I don't know. I just haven't got a job. And he was like, right, okay. He asked me to go and do a demo in the Magic Studio. And he also said, don't worry, Neil, everything will be all right. And, when you hear stories of Richard, you obviously hear those stories of, red cards, yellow cards, all this sort of stuff. He's an incredibly passionate person to do with radio, but he's also a pretty compassionate person. At that particular time, I was like, I've never met this guy before, and he's showing me some empathy on a situation that's just happened to me, because I was literally just dumped out after 2 years. Not long enough for me to make a name for myself. No house, don't know where to go, got to get married. Oh my God, what do I do? So after Richard had contacted me, Saf was already doing some cover shows over at Heart. So she'd been on Capital Disney before that while I was at Capital, and she had gone to do some cover shows at Heart. London really didn't work out massively well for Saf, even though she was touted in the Radio Times as the next Joe Wiley to be coming down from Galaxy 105, 106 down to London. And I can't believe I'm going to actually say this, but when I was obviously dumped out of Capital, a month or so had gone by and they had pulled Saf in. And they pulled, and I don't know if you've ever heard of this happen within the radio industry before to a married couple, newly married couple. But they basically sat Saf down and said, Saf, I'm just going to let you know that we haven't got any more work for you, but we're replacing you with your new husband.
Jesus Christ. Oh my
and
God.
Yeah, so that was a situation that we had to deal with at that time, and had to take it because one of us had to work to be able to pay for the bills to be able to get where we're going. So
Neil, that story's on a par with Chris Brooks being in a cult.
yeah. By the way,
He's blown me away.
I didn't even know that he was in a cult, and I've known him for a long time. But yeah, so that was a situation that we had to deal with at the time that nobody else knew about. That Saf got dumped out of London radio to be replaced by me. I mean, incredibly difficult to handle. So I ended up going over to Heart and doing those cover shows first. And this was before Richard Park, before Global had come into that building. And we had some good radars for some cover stuff that I was doing. But I was told, unfortunately, Neil, there's no cover for you anymore, or there's no shows for you. So you're off as well. So both of us have effectively gone, but Richard had just turned up at Heart at that point, and there was a radar meeting, and he congratulated me on radar results in the meeting that I wasn't at because I wasn't around.
Wow.
So I had a very quick phone call after that radar meeting going, "Where are you?" I was like, "Well, I haven't got any shows. I've been told that there's no more shows here." Okay, you probably need to come and talk to us very quickly. And from that moment on, I guess that was the whole moment when Richard was aligning with Ashley for Global's takeover everything and pulling everything together and moving over to Capital. And I got the chance to walk back into Leicester Square, which I'd been dumped out of in 2006, which I never thought would ever happen ever again. To see the people, to see Courtney on reception, on the security, to see Imran and everybody on reception, to see Royston, to see all those people, and they were just looking at me going, "Welcome back." And I was like, "Hi, I'm on a different floor now, but I'm back." And I came in to do some Heart stuff, and then I got drive time when Emma B left, and did drive time on Heart for, I think it was about 5 or 6 years. And that's kind of when it ended properly in 2012. But this was, that was just a mad time, just a totally mad time. And Richard Park was, integral in me being back into radio again at such a high level. Without his input, I wouldn't have been.
Is this going out, or is it just in our headphones?
The hamster's fine.
It was a technical problem. You heard something on air you shouldn't have done.
Oh, yeah.
You then do some work for the Big City Network for a year.
Yeah.
Now you're no longer on the radio.
No.
How does that feel? Because I mean, you've achieved so much. You've been through a lot. I think more so than a lot of presenters have.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny because when I knew I was doing this with you, Saf and I have talked about it, and she went, 1, don't look like a prick. I was like, okay, I'll try not to. 2, don't sound bitter, and I'm not. There's some things I'm not saying, and people I haven't named. We were meant to record this a few weeks ago. Thank God we didn't, because my head was in a completely different space. So I've chilled out slightly about it. I don't want it to sound bitter at all. My career was brilliant. I had a fantastic time. I got the opportunity to do many different things, but there were just a couple of things through it that, only a couple of things that were difficult to deal with. So don't make it like, I don't want to make it sound like I was massively hard done by, or that happened, and I'm not digging holes. I was on the radio, for God's sake, and it was a brilliant opportunity to be creative and to be in an industry that I absolutely loved. But I weirdly don't miss it.
Nothing about it.
I miss dance music a lot. Well, I don't miss it because I still have it here, in my studio here. I've got decks over there. One of the biggest regrets was selling my whole vinyl record collection because Saf said I didn't have room for it. No. Yeah, that's probably worse than me taking a show, to be totally honest. And I had like 20,000 vinyls, so they all went. Yeah, so I don't really miss being on the radio. I think I was very, very lucky to have a career that I did have. But being in, I haven't been in a club for Christ, I don't know, 12 years, 15 years, I don't know.
I think we're too old.
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
You're too old.
Yeah, but
I wondered, what's your proudest achievement? Because it's a hell of a CV, a hell of a career. What's your proudest achievement?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I think everything that I personally achieved at Galaxy, it was the only ever place that I got a radar bonus, and it actually paid off. Normally they would put them in such a way that there was no way that your radar bonus would ever pay off. Unfortunately, it fucking did, and I got thousands.
I tell you what, I remember those clauses. Because you'd be like, fuck, I've triggered the clause.
Yeah.
And then your boss would go, read the small print.
Exactly.
It says only people called Barbara.
Yeah, and guess what, Foxy? I went, read the small print. I've achieved that too. Where's the cash? Being serious, Galaxy 105 was a real achievement. It was just a wonderful place to be. Horizon was wonderful as well. Launching my own show, Club Fresh, on Galaxy was really important to me. I don't know. I think just having the ability to be in a career for 20-something years and to be able to see that out and to leave on my terms, because notice you didn't ask me why I left in 2012.
Why did you leave in 2012?
Because, I was doing breakfast cover as well as Drive on Heart. Again, I wasn't a breakfast show presenter, and I was massively scared about certainly filling in the shoes of Jamie Theakston and being with Emma Bunton and whoever else was on breakfast at the time, Alicia Dixon or Gino DeCampo or whoever I had to do it with. It was a time where I felt myself feeling like I was going in one direction or being led in one direction and wasn't actually going to be going in that direction. And I was pretty sure that I wasn't going to be going in that direction. And I was proved right that I wasn't going to be going in that direction. So I decided to say enough's enough. A couple of weeks ago, you would have got the whole story on this, but I actually made the decision myself to say, do you know what? I can't do this. This is no more. I don't want to be treated in the way that I felt like I was at that point anymore. Went and had a bit of a chat with Richard, who was brilliant, because at the same time my son was diagnosed with autism. So my son is 14 years old now, but he was diagnosed with autism, the age of 2, non-verbal. And that was pretty difficult for me as well. So I had a bit of a funny time on air, on Heart around that time. I found it very difficult to focus. So it kind of felt a little overwhelming and also a little bit misled in places, that I just said, do you know what? Actually, I think this is probably it. Let's wrap this up. So I got the opportunity to walk away from it and not be told, that's it. You have no more radio in you anymore. See you later. So that felt really, a proud moment, a difficult moment, really, really difficult. But yeah, that's what I did. And I thought it would be easier. Well, I'm just going to go and run my own company. That'll be easy, won't it? Fucking hell. Nope. Well,
let's just finish on what you're doing now. Because you've got a digital creative agency, haven't you?
Yeah. Everything that I learned in radio, in the digital field, I was massively intrigued by everything as I went through my career. Whether it be music production, because we didn't touch on the fact that I produce for Ministry of Sound and other people, whether it be, I don't know, anything, websites, anything like that, internet. I was just massively intrigued by that, and in the creative space, I wanted to stay in there. I was hugely hooked on video, so would do lots of video projects in the early days. So I wanted to do something that allowed me to have some of those creative things that I'd learnt over my years in my new career. So set up an agency called Webvid. That's webvid.com. Thank you very much. That's just a small agency where we, at our peak, had 10 members of staff doing visual branding and podcasts and lots of other different bits and pieces. And then over the right-hand side, I have a company called Swipe. And that company, we develop digital apps. So we have a thing called CrowdScream, which is a social media mechanism for wars, which F1 have used for many years. We have something called Camflare, which is a video recording mechanism. So you can send out a link and get video from anyone anywhere in the world straight to your Dropbox. We have something called Crowdlist for events. We have, multiple different applications that we made. And I have a really wonderful, strong team that I absolutely adore. COVID was incredibly difficult for us, but we stuck it out and we kind of got through that. And it's something that I'm hugely passionate about and will continue to push forward with forevermore. And I think it's really important, by the way, that if you're listening to this and you're in radio and at the moment you're going through a very difficult time, maybe you're at the BBC and there's some interviews that are going on about your job or something, and you're very upset about the whole situation. Just remember that you do have lots of transferable skills, hell of a lot of transferable skills that you could use to go forward, to create something amazing. One thing I did find about the radio industry, John, was that when you were let go, or if you were sacked, or if you were moved, there wasn't this care and attention to be able to say to somebody, the stuff that you have, your communication skills, your digital skills, your editing skills, could be easily transferred to something else. Don't worry, there's loads of other stuff out there. And I feel there's lots of people that could have benefited from someone being there to tell them that. So if you're listening to this at that, that point in your life where you're thinking, oh God, what do I do next? Just jot down the things that you're really good at, that you've done over the years that you've been in radio, because all of those things you can push forward with yourself if anything does go wrong, or you take the decision to actually do that in your life. You've seen it with Hursty. Steph's got Believe Achieve. She does loads of keynotes out everywhere. There's lots of wonderful things that you can do. Don't feel alone and don't feel like you have no place. To be honest, if you're listening to this and you fancy a chat, then my phone line's always open.
Christ alive, Neil! I'm going to call you on the way home. I'll tell you what, though, everything you just said there, absolutely, and some wise words. Can I just say, I don't think you've sounded bitter at all. I think Saffron will be fine with Crunch and Roll. I think you've got an incredible career. I always just remember you being the dance guy, the dance guru. Do you know what I mean? You were Mr. Dance, and I admire that. And thank you so much for being on Crunch and Roll.
It's been a real honour. I'm just excited to be on here and be able to talk about a couple of things, including Galaxy and Capital, that you find interesting. Hopefully somebody else will too. Thanks, John.
I know you've done voiceover work, but as you well know by now, you've done a lot of voiceover stuff. So, as always, can you take us away with the end credits?
Yeah, so weirdly in voiceovers, by the way, John, I've become the infomercial person. So all the shit infomercials that you hear on TV are normally me, from CD collections all the way through to tables on legs. It's me. So shall I do this in the style of an infomercial or not?
Yes,
okay.
Please. Oh, no, do you know what? Scrap that.
Okay.
I want Neil Bentley, Galaxy 105.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah.
You've been listening to Crunch and Roll with me, Neil Bentley. Subscribe on your favourite podcast app to get every new episode as soon as they drop. Crunch and Roll is a 969 media production presented by John Foxy Fox and produced by Simon Borsovsky.
Oh, yeah.